This week we're going to be looking at 7 strategies to improve adherence and attendance, quite linked topics that are of a big importance to everyone running a contact center operation. So quite interesting agenda we've got there. Dealing with the strategies, we're delighted to be joined by a regular on our webinars, Penny Reynolds, who's the principal of the Call Center School in Nashville. Welcome to you, Penny.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
We've also got Dean Couchman from injixo, who's going to be taking us through a demonstration of some of the technology.
Thank you very much, Jonty.
And another well-known figure on our webinar circuit, Chris Dealy from injixo. Chris, welcome across to you.
Thanks, Jonty, and good afternoon, everybody.
We're going to be doing top tips from the audience as we go through. Slightly different from our series last year. We'll be doing those as we run across. In 1 or 2 words, probably, could you describe how you would describe adherence or attendance in the contact center? So whether it's problematic, straightforward, you need buy-in, just in 1 or 2 words, if you could put in how you describe adherence or attendance in your contact center. So Kerry has said pretty good. Who else have we got coming through with the answers? A number of people typing away. Heather, Elizabeth. Jamie has said adherence is poor, attendance is very good. Elizabeth has said it's challenging. Just waiting for Heather, Brian, Rebecca, Newer to type in. What other answers have we got? Challenging. So Newer said adherence is improving. Monica said must be improved since we're starting feedback to CSAs. Rebecca said it's hard work, and Kevin has said very good. So Penny, quite a range of different responses.
Absolutely. Sounds like it's going pretty well for some, and hopefully those are going to be the people sharing some tips later on.
Indeed. Well, so I think that's a good place to bring you in, Penny. And if you could take us through the first of the 7 strategies to improve attendance and adherence. If we can put your slides up on your screen.
All right. I'll take over here. Okay. Well, like I said, the topic today is 7 strategies. So we're going to begin with number 1, and we're going to be going through these strategies pretty quickly today. But the very first one is just defining the problem itself. So what do we mean by adherence? And then strategy 2, we're going to put a little bit of quantification to it. Now, as we define the problem, sometimes if you ask the staff, is it a problem? They may not think so, and you sometimes hear, hey, you know, it's just 5 or 10 minutes here or there. Give me a break. I mean, what's the big deal after all? So one of the first things to do is to quantify things. And we do this because if you're building a business case, let's say, for changing a process or getting some budget to give people more rewards, let's say, for better adherence, or if you're looking at trying to justify software tools to help you manage it, you may be building a business case. So one of the things you want to do is define the problem in as many ways as you can and put some numbers to it. So when we think about the problem of adherence, it just simply means people aren't there when they're supposed to be there. Typically that means they're not there. A lack of adherence could be that they're in their seats when they're not supposed to be, but that's not the problem we're mostly grappling with here. So when we say a lack of adherence, we're generally talking about understaffing problems. And when we approach any call center issue, you always want to examine it from the perspectives of your 3 main stakeholder groups. And those 3 are, of course, your customers, your frontline staff, and senior management's perspective. So all 3 of those. So let's take a look at what's impacted with those 3 groups, essentially the speed of answer to the customer, the workload and occupancy or how busy they are for the staff, and the overall cost of running the operation from senior management's perspective when just a few people are missing. So here we have a look at the morning view, and we're going to take a sample half hour. So at at 7 a.m. We forecast 350 calls to arrive. That's actually what's coming in today. We have our handle time. And for that workload, we had planned on 69 staff being in place. Now, some of you are larger centers where that's about your size. Some of you are much smaller. If you're much smaller than this, you can look at this and certainly understand that the impact will be even bigger on you when a few people are missing. But let's say that just 5% of the staff are missing. So we're not talking about half the call center, but just a handful. So 5%, and that equates to 4 people, almost not even visible to the naked eye as you look out across that contact center. But 4 people are missing. So let's take a look at what that impact is with 4 people gone. The first obvious impact that we always think about is, well, what's the impact on speed of answer? And of course that's impacted. We were staffing in this situation for a pretty quick answer at 20 seconds, and with 4 people missing, you can see that that goes up to 73 seconds. So that's a huge piece. But what you always want to do is look at all 3 impacts. So yes, it's an impact on the speed of answer, or ASA as we have it shown here in the chart here. So that 350 calls at 320 seconds each equates to 62 hours of work to do in a 1-hour equivalent period. So 62 Erlangs. And if we had 69 staff in place, we'd have an ASA of 14 seconds, nice quick answer, and look out at the very end of that column, the chart, an occupancy of 89%. So 69 people doing 62 hours of work. We divide that, and it's 89%. So it's a nice occupancy level as well. Everyone's busy. We want them to be busy, but they're not crazy busy. So 11% idle time, nice breather in between calls, and everything's going very well. But 4 people are missing. So instead of 69 people, we have 65. And so you see there in the green, you'll follow along that row with me. Instead of 14 seconds, it's 73. So that's an extra 59 seconds of wait time on average. An extra minute. Now, if it was just a few seconds extra, customers aren't going to notice that much. But an extra minute, that becomes noticeable to them. And some of them may feel the need to tell you about how long they've been waiting when you do get on the phone with them. So a noticeable extra delay time. Our occupancy, instead of being 89% and that nice 11%, getting a breather in between calls, that's jumped up to 95%. So now they're only getting a 5% different or kind of idle time, downtime, and that's really noticeable to them. Just like our customers notice that longer wait, the staff will notice that, hey, the calls are coming in one right after the other, call after call after call. So early in the day, we've already set this, hey, it's a hectic, crazy day here today. And once again, this doesn't happen because half the people in the center are missing. Only 4 people have cut everyone's idle time in half. So we really want to be aware of that and what that occupancy impact can be. The final impact is, you may say, well, at least we're not paying for those 4 people yet if they're not logged in and taking calls, so at least we're saving some money. Well, not necessarily. If you're providing a free phone service, so you're paying for the cost of those telephone calls, guess what? That adds up. As soon as you answer the call, put them in queue, and they're out there listening to your delay messages or music, you're paying as those seconds tick away. So at a rate of about 10 pence, I think, per minute, Chris was good enough to provide me with the UK numbers. That's about 34 pounds, and that's just for the half hour. That's not an extra 34 pounds at the end of the month on your phone bill. That's for the half hour. So nearly 70 as we think about what's that extra cost. Those 4 people being missing, it's costing you money as well. So those are just 3 ways to look at that. And
just
you always want
quick
to...
injection, Penny, sorry to put in.
Yeah.
But that, of course, for a lot of call centres, that's not an issue, the free phone cost, because for a lot of operations are using premium rate numbers, 087, 084, numbers, but I guess most people know that that revenue stream is going to come to an end for some companies come June this year, because from then it will be illegal for a lot of call centres to use those daily rate numbers for customer service. Now, it doesn't apply to government, gambling, I think financial services and travel, but it does apply to retail. It applies to utilities, energy and telcos, so this is going to become more of an issue for those organisations from June this year.
Absolutely. So big impact there, and that can absolutely impact the cost and the way you look at what's the cost of poor service. So we have three possibilities here. We can just, okay, we're -4 people, so we just live with the cost of the long delays, the high occupancy, the higher telephone costs. Or we can say, you know, at any given time, we kind of expect 5% of the staff just aren't going to be there in place where they're supposed to be. And we factor that in as shrinkage. And we account for it that way, but we're accounting for it another way, and there's a replacement cost there. Another way to look at the numbers is to look at, you know, various ways just to calculate lost time. So you're paying someone to do the work, but they're not there and available. So here's just a real quick little example of another way to look at the numbers and what the value of schedule adherence really is. So in this example, we have 100 agents, 10 minutes a day of just lost time. And some of you out there may be thinking, I wish it was just 10 minutes a day. It's typically higher than that. And here we're using a wage rate of £8 per hour. So you can see a quick calculation there. We just look at the number of minutes per week lost, multiply that by the number of weeks in the year. So that's how much time a year is lost, over 40 hours, pretty depressing, even at 10 minutes a day. And then we apply the wage rate and the number of people. So in this example, that's, you know, nearly 35,000 pounds that it's costing you just with that little bit of lost time, 10 minutes a day. So you have to start looking at this as if we could just capture a little bit of that back, you know, what would that look like? So very important that you're quantifying this, and there's lots of other ways to look at it, but very important that we get some quantity around this to start.
Okay, well, we're going to jump to a poll now, and the poll question is, what is your adherence goal? So is it less than 90%? Is it 90 to 92%, 93 to 95%, 96 to 97%, or 97% plus? So just like to vote, we'd like to get some feeling for the adherence goals in your contact center. So if you'd just like to vote on that. Votes are coming in quite thick and fast there. So this is in the polling panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So let's have a look at the answers. I think we've got most people have voted there. I'll just push the results now up onto the screen. The most common answer is 93 to 95%. It's quite spread. 32% of the audience saying that. 30% 90 to 92%. 18% is above 90, is 96 to 97, and 12% greater than 97%, with 7% less than 90. So Penny, is that sort of in bounds with what you would have expected?
Absolutely. I mean, the most common numbers are typically in that 90 to 95% range. So our audience is tracking with the industry there. Absolutely.
Okay, and what I'd like to now do is I'd now like to drill down on another part, and if your adherence score yesterday was different to your goal, why was that? Of this one?
I think, as Penny was saying earlier, it's very rare that you find people are out of adherence because they're working when you don't want them to, although that can happen when you've got calls that have gone on too long and the agents are working into their breaks. I think possibly arriving late will be a popular one, and not taking breaks at the right time, but let's see if I'm proven right or wrong.
That's a bit of an each-way bet there, Chris. So let's
I like to do that way.
Spread betting there. So let's have a look. Well, your second choice was right there. Agents not taking breaks at the right time, 53%. 20% agents performing the wrong tasks. That's quite an interesting one. Agents arriving late, and a few comments in the chat room. Also, calls are under forecast has meant more idle time than we expected. And Joe said we have a problem with most of them. Jim says, not really a common reason. It's a mixture of them all. So, Penny, a bit of a mix there.
Yeah, always a bit of a mix. It's some people that are tardy and late for work every day. Some people just can't seem to remember what state they're supposed to be in. Some want to go to break with their buddies and not when they're scheduled to take a break. And there's some other more even legitimate reasons than that. But yeah, always a mixture.
Okay, so just before we move on to strategy 3, just a reminder, we are going to be doing top tips for measuring adherence. So we're going to be doing that after the next strategy. So if you'd like to start putting your tips for measuring adherence, and we're going to be picking those up in about 3 minutes' time. So if pass the baton now across to Penny, and if Penny, you'd like to take us through your third strategy.
Okay, let me grab the screen back here. Okay, so strategy 3 has to do with, tracking this. The old adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, is certainly true. So we're going to be talking about tools and ways to measure in just a minute, but part of it is just defining what you mean by adherence. Is it good enough that they're giving you X number of minutes per day? And, for some organizations, that's all that's expected, but for most contact centers, it's not just the right number of minutes, it's the right start and stop times and breaks and so on. So here's an example of, a schedule that's starting at 8 in the morning, and you see where the breaks and lunches are for the day. So that's what's expected, and there's 450 minutes of login phone time as part of that. But someone has come in just a little late. Common story here. Now this person is good enough to have actually made some time up at the end of the day because they came in 15 minutes late, and it's a common thing for many people new to the call center environment. It's like, yeah, I got here 15 minutes late, don't worry, I'll make it up at lunch or at the end of the day. And so while the number of minutes worked for the day is, it's pretty close, we probably wouldn't be too upset with this, it's the wrong minutes throughout the day. So they're there when they're not supposed to be there, and then they're missing when we have them scheduled to work. So if we look at true adherence, what we're looking at is trying to get those black and green lines to match up, the scheduled and actual. And then the red and yellow indicate where people are not complying or conforming to the schedule. So in this instance, while we do have 435 minutes worked compared to the 450 scheduled, only 390 of that was at the right times. And that, of course, if everyone's doing that, that's going to throw us off, and we're not going to have the workforce in place when the workload arrives. So really important, one thing is that you're defining this for agents so that they understand it's not just the number of minutes, but the right minutes, but also have something in place to help you manage and take a closer look at this. So Chris, I think you're going to talk us through this next slide. Here's just one example of how you can look at adherence and conformance.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. I mean, this is just an example of an adherence and conformance report from our system, injixo WFM. And we're looking at a guy called Nick Davis here, one particular day in his life, and we're getting a bit of a breakdown, an explosion of what he was scheduled to do as opposed to what he actually did, with an explanation of each of those deviations from adherence where that happens. So we see, for example, that this guy was a bit like Penny's example, was scheduled to start at 7:30, actually turned up at 7:36 in the actual column, and so on. And what we get is each time there is that deviation, we're getting a variance description in the right-hand column. What the report does is to make it nice and easy for us to get that snapshot, is to look at the bottom half of the screen where we're getting a summary of the adherence and conformance figures. So we're seeing this guy, Nick, he did even better than in Penny's example. Yes, he more than made up for his late show. He was 104% in conformance, so he actually worked 4% more than his scheduled hours, his contracted hours. But unfortunately, the more important measure, his adherence score, was only 93%. So he was a good boy, working longer than he was paid to work, but he wasn't actually working at the times when we wanted him. So as you can see, this sort of report is great for one-to-ones and appraisals and things like that. And sort of
well, and you might look at good old Nick there with working more than he was scheduled, but if it's if he's getting paid for all of those minutes, sometimes going over and being there when you're not supposed to be there is a cost implication as well.
Absolutely, So obviously, if you're not using proper measurement of time, then you're going to be paying him for those minutes you didn't want him. Quite right. So looking at some of the terminology we've been using today, with the title of the seminar is about adherence and attendance, putting my teeth back in. But you hear other words like compliance and so on used often interchangeably. Just to be clear about the terminology we're using today, conformance, as we saw on that previous example there, previous report example, is about working when we want, people working when we want them to work. So adherence is people working, starting at the scheduled start time and finishing at the scheduled finish time. Conformance, on the other hand, is about the number of hours and minutes worked as opposed to the number that was scheduled. So those are the two key measures. Now, you could say that both of these are important, and of course they are. We might argue that adherence is the more important measure. But I think it's probably true to say that adherence is more important or more relevant when we're talking about abandoning contacts, like calls and web chats. So if the agent is not at his or her seat, there's a chance that the call or the chat is lost, and that obviously is bad for customer experience and could be bad for sales. If we're talking about asynchronous activities like handling emails or back office, things like that, where there isn't any sense of abandonment, we just need to make sure that the backlog's cleared every day, you could argue that conformance is the more important measure to look at. It really depends on what your business is about. And as we saw, the range of adherence scores are typically in that range 92 to 98%.
Okay, very good.
Back to you, Penny.
Right, we're going to go jump across now to top tips for measuring adherence. Your chance to send in about how you define and measure adherence. We've had a couple of tips in already, so let's have a look at what tips we've got coming in for measuring and defining adherence. Sharon has said reporting on log-on live time and reporting on activity per agent against the tasks required to be done, using access security and system action category tracking could be a very useful way for doing that. I guess, is that very similar, Chris, from the report that you've shown up?
It overlaps, certainly. And looking at the log-on live time, I think Sharon and hopefully some other members of the audience will be interested in what we've got to show regarding real-time monitoring, which enables you to take corrective action in a timely fashion.
Very good. So let's have a look. Jamie said annualized hours can help with the lateness of breaks and so on. Penny, if you found that also very useful?
Well, actually, that is one of the practices that is much more common, I think, in the UK than it is in North America. So annualized hours is not as much of a practice we see on this side of the pond as you guys do.
All right, let's have a look at a couple more tips. Jamie says the best one for us is to use break balls so that you can control how many go at any one time. We then take break times out of adherence. Certainly having a pot of, I've seen that with sort of ping pong balls, 5 ping pong balls in a goldfish bowl. You take one if you're going for break, and you can't go to break until somebody's come back. So there's a bit of a team pressure to do that.
I was in a centre in Glasgow on Monday who used exactly that method with tennis balls.
Alexander says, I find the best way to encourage adherence is to fully explain the effect and reasoning behind any constraints placed on the agents. This helps them to be invested in and feel responsible for their adherence. Certainly self-management, Penny, is quite a critical one overall.
Absolutely, and that's going to be something that's going to come up in just a moment as we're talking about the whys of adherence versus non-adherence, and that's a huge piece of it. Absolutely, it's a huge piece of it.
Well, that sounds like it's a perfect lead into strategy number 4, Penny, if you'd like to take us through your 4th strategy.
Okay.
And we'll be coming back to tips later on in the webinar.
Okay, very good. Well, strategy 4, and we got a little piece of the goal piece as part of our poll earlier, but it's very important that you set a reasonable goal that agents understand, and it's actually within their control, and it's something that's achievable. So you really want to think about how much time do they need in this transition of, typically as they log in and out of the system, but what is a reasonable number of minutes? And you really want to get agent buy-in here, just like what is a reasonable goal? Now let's say that we're going to give them 5 minutes around each break and 10 minutes around lunch and maybe a few extra minutes. Well, that can quickly add up, so you may be at 94%. So if they're scheduled for 420 minutes of the 480 we're paying them for the day, 94% goal gives them 25 sort of free minutes, a safety net, so to speak. But the key is defining that safety net, and what do you mean by that? Just a real quick story here. We were working with a contact center recently where they actually had a goal of about 92% adherence. So essentially they were getting a little over 30 minutes safety net per day. Well, guess what? Every single person in the center felt obliged and entitled to take all 33 minutes of that. Many of them were taking just an extra 30 minutes for lunch all at one time and getting in place the other parts of the day. But essentially they were giving away 30 minutes a day of paid time, but hey, it's yours. So the executive team took a look at that and said, hey, this is crazy. We're going to cut this in half. So they actually went to an adherence goal from 92% to 96%. We were back in that center a few months later, and we said, so how did that change go with the adherence? And the workforce team said, well, we're meeting 96%. And we said, well, that's fantastic. That's great. And they said, no, you don't understand. Everyone's still doing exactly the same thing as before. But now, because adherence is on every agent's scorecard, and perhaps even more importantly, team adherence is on each supervisor's scorecard, they're making sure that they hit those numbers, but they're hitting those numbers by essentially exceptioning out every reason that they're out of adherence. So, oh, Sally was caught on a long call. Can you change that? Oh, I asked so-and-so to, stay late and do this. So what was happening there in that center was that each team, each supervisor was sending an average of 8 to 10 emails at the end of each day requesting adjustments, if you will, to what really happened that day, just until the numbers came into line. So essentially the same behaviors are still happening. We're just manipulating numbers to get the number we want. So you really have to be careful as you set these goals that they're achievable, there's buy-in, you can do lots of things to manipulate them after the fact, but the key is getting a goal that is manageable and practical up front, and then and stick to it. And if someone's 5 minutes off here, 10 minutes off here, that's what that safety net is for. But you can get into very quickly. This call center actually had 2 people to their workforce team just to manage exceptions. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So that could be a whole other seminar in itself, just managing this daily process here. But the key here is, you want to set reasonable goals. You do want to consider the average handle time of calls. So if you have one call center that's the average handle time is a 3-minute call, and then you have another center where the average handle time is 15 minutes, those two have no hopes of being at the same adherence levels. So with those longer calls, there will be more of a chance you're caught on a call, you can't go to break at the right time. So you do want to consider the average handle time of calls and the likelihood of getting those very long calls. It's a common excuse. It's like, oh, I got caught on a long call. It's funny sometimes how the same person is the one getting caught on that call right at the same time every day, just because they want to go to break with their, with their friend. So you want to really take a look at that, and also identify all the barriers that may prevent adherence, whether it's a physical barrier, it's something in the workplace that's causing something, whether it's the types of calls that they're handling. We're going to talk about some of those barriers in just a minute. But you want to get your frontline staff involved in defining what's reasonable. Many centers have a process where essentially there's a pass-fail, if you will. So we expect at least 90% adherence, or 92, or whatever the number is. But in order for them not to just kind of, okay, I'm going to take this always, every day, this many minutes, is to define grades of adherence. So this is the pass-fail. This is the minimum expected, 90%. But if you're at 92% or 94 or 96, perhaps there's something in it for you, and there can be many different rewards for that. So you may define different grades of adherence so that those doing better are rewarded for it in some way. And we'll talk about what some of those rewards are in just a minute as well.
Okay,
so
we're going to jump across
ahead,
to
Jonty.
a poll now. And the poll question we have here is, what percentage of your team have a problem with adherence? Any predictions of where you think this is going to end up?
Oh. I'd edge toward the lower scale. I know say, but I'll probably go for the 0 to 9%. From being a team leader myself, I've found that you either get the odd individual that always, like Penny said, you'll find it's always the same person all the time, who try and not flaunt the rules as such, but try and live on the edge. So,
well, let's have a look. So it certainly does seem to be on the lower end. 25% only on the 0 to 9%, about 33% on the 10 to 19%, 20% 20 to 50, and 1/10 of our audience, over half the team have got problems with adherence, and a rather worrying 12% don't know there. So if you've got any comments on that, if you'd like to add that into the chat room. So Penny, how did that time with what you thought?
Yeah, that's about what I expected. You know, the biggest numbers are typically in that, you know, usually a few people on the team, so that 10 to 19%. You know, 1 out of 5 people, 1 out of 10 people. So let's talk about now. We're gonna take our math hats off for a little bit. Some of you are going, phew, thanks. We're gonna put our psychology hats on now, and we're gonna talk about okay, why? So there are some people that are in their seats on time every day. Don't you wish you had a whole group of those? But there are some that are constantly just not where they're supposed to be, and then some kind of in the middle. So let's talk just real quickly about why. And then I think diagnosing this is very important so you can address root cause. So 3 basic reasons here. And this is not just 3 basic reasons for schedule adherence. It's any performance issue in the workplace. So it's a supervisory model that we use for diagnosing problems and coaching appropriately. But let's apply it to schedule adherence. So the 3 basic reasons are people either they don't know, and it's not I don't know how, it's I'm unaware. So either I'm unaware of what it is you expect from me in the first place, or I'm aware but I'm not getting enough feedback to know how well I'm doing. The can't is I just don't have the capability to do this. Either I don't know how, I don't have the skill, or there's something preventing me, there's an obstacle or a barrier. And then the won't is exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, I know it's expected and I can do this if I wanted to, but I've decided not to do it. So it's kind of a willful thing. So very quickly, let's take a look at these 3, see if we can figure out what may be broken and how to fix it. So this is a huge piece here, the don't know. That's where, as one of our attendees was saying earlier, that education is a huge piece of this. So you have to make sure that they know what the expectations are. They understand that it's not just how many minutes work, but it's the right time, and why it's important, that power of one, of just one person missing can cause all of this. So the expectations need to be very clear, power of one training, and you want to do that when they start work and their initial new hire training, but you also want to do some nice friendly reminders as we go along. And then making them aware of their behaviors. And that can be one-on-one coaching, certainly, but there are some centers that publish an adherence report with everyone's name on it, so everyone sees who's contributing what to adherence. I kind of like that personally. It's, you know, let's all take a look at who's on time every day. And then also we can give live notifications. So feedback is key here as well. So education and feedback can honestly address many adherence issues in the center. The second diagnosis area is the can't area. And while the can't may be a reason for many other performance problems in the contact center, it's generally not the reason for adherence problems. Most everybody knows how to read their schedule and look at a clock and get to their seat, so that's typically not it. There can be, in some cases, however, a can't that's due to a barrier or an obstacle. As one example, just a physical barrier. One center we were working with was out of space in their contact center and had to move one of their groups to another area of the building. It was just a small group of about 8 people, not really big enough or space enough in this other area for them to have their own break room and all of that. So when it was time for their break, they had to log out, walk down a long hallway, take a slow elevator to even get to the break room. So it was 5 minutes just transportation time, if you will, before they could even get to the break room, and then 5 minutes back. So it wasn't really fair to expect the same adherence to schedule and break times as their counterparts who were there with the break room right beside them. So that's an example of a physical barrier. And these can be things like actual physical or health needs and various things. So you want to really look at, are there barriers or obstacles creating the situation? And for those, if you can remove those barriers, of course, that's what you want to do. The final area, however, is the main reason probably for most adherence issues. When we say won't, it's either a complete lack of motivation, or they've decided not to do what they're supposed to be doing because of improper consequences. Either they're getting a negative consequence for positive behavior for doing the right thing, and you know what, that can happen as we're talking about adherence. Let's take 2 agents sitting side by side. We've got Rachel and Chris. And Rachel is on time every day, in her seat, ready to go. Is she getting, what kind of consequences is she getting for that? Well, for many contact centers, she may not be getting a reward per se for that. And essentially because she's there on time and some of the other people aren't, she's getting more calls and having to work harder just by doing the right thing. On the other hand, Chris, who's maybe a great agent otherwise, great phone skills, we love Chris, customers love him, but several days, like my name choices there, several days a week, Chris is just late, he's just late getting there. And also, you know, he likes to take a break when his friends take a break. And, you know, we haven't really done much about that because he's so good otherwise, you know, so the supervisor just really hasn't addressed it. So let's take a look at how what's happening to Chris can directly or perhaps indirectly be influencing what he does every single day. So it's all about consequences. And we think about consequences as positive or negative. And when I ask call centers, do you have positive and negative consequences in place for schedule adherence? Most will say, yeah, we do, actually. You know, it's part of their scorecard. It can impact their bonus. Yeah, so there are consequences. And then I say, well, do you still have schedule adherence issues? And they'll say, well, actually we do. So obviously the consequences are not working. But in many cases, the positive and negative part's there, but the other 2 pieces haven't been addressed. And so there are 3 important characteristics of consequences. There's the positive negative piece, but these other 2 are really important too. There's the timeliness of the consequence, how immediate it is versus out there in the future somewhere, and how sure or how certain it is to happen, the consistency of it versus uncertain. So let's take a quick look at Chris's behaviors here. So this is someone, again, that's consistently coming in late for work, great agent otherwise, but just this issue. So the consequences for Chris, let's examine why he keeps doing this. Well, first of all, he's getting 10 minutes of extra sleep in the morning. Well, that's a positive consequence, so it's reinforcing that. It's immediate, and it's certain. Or maybe Chris is actually in the building on time every morning, but he just likes to socialize. So he's in the break room talking about last night's Downton Abbey episode. He just likes to socialize. Positive consequence for Chris. It's immediate and it's certain. And guess what? He doesn't have to take as many calls. That's also positive. It's immediate and it's certain. So these things are strengthening the behavior of not being on time. Now you may say, well, there are some negative consequences too. Chris is getting attention from the supervisor. Is that a positive or negative? Well, that's probably a negative. But, and look at what the question mark here is it immediate? Or is it one of those situations which happens all the time in that, you know, supervisors have a lot to do and they don't address these issues right now in a timely fashion? Chris's supervisor may note that, okay, I've noticed he's been late for work 3 times this week, and when we have our one-on-one meeting 2 weeks from now, I'm going to mention that to him. That's not immediate enough. And even the certainty of it may not be there. It's like, well, but he's doing so good on all the other things, I'm really going to, you know, choose my battles here, and that was just not important enough. So supervisor involvement is one of the keys to making this work. Timely, consistent attention to it. If Chris was getting some peer pressure to it here, that would sure be a negative. Sometimes the peer pressure is more important to them than management pressure. But they've got to have information, right? So we go back to, do they know Chris is doing this? So if you can print that report, put it on the wall, give them access to it. There are many contact centers that real-time adherence screen, which typically the workforce people look at, or maybe the supervisors have access. There's some contact centers that have put that big screen up on the big wall for everyone to see. So when everyone's getting hit really hard with call after call after call, you can look up to say, well, I see Chris isn't in place, and at least he gets kind of the evil look when he's getting to his desk in the morning. So that's a big piece there, but the key here is your consequences have to be in place and immediate and sure to happen. Now, Chris may miss out on a quarterly bonus, get a poor appraisal. Certainly those are negative consequences, but many people, and I have to say, especially our younger workforce, they're all about what's right in front of them right now. And so quarterly bonus 3 months from now versus hanging out in the break room a little bit longer right now, I'm going to weigh those two, and may not be immediate enough, I think, to really impact behaviors. So let's talk about what you do as tools and techniques for managing this.
We're going to jump across to a really quick poll now. What tools and techniques are you using to manage and improve adherence? Are you using frontline education, for instance, the Power of One, which we did a good webinar on last year, rewards for good adherence, which would be the carrot, or the stick, consequences for bad adherence? Is it supervisor attention, coaching floor walkers, or is it workforce management software you're using there? So if you'd just like to vote on those, that would be good. Any other answers you can put into the chat room there, and quite a range overall. Looks like the top one there, Chris, you'd be pleased to hear, is workforce management software, followed very closely by, or a little way behind, floor walkers and frontline education. So I think, Chris, you're going to have a look at how to increase agent engagement now.
That's it exactly, Jonty, yes.
Just one comment, if I can make one quick comment on those poll results. We've got more sticks getting voted on than carrots. And just one comment there is that I think one of the things you have to do is to reward good performance. The carrot's more effective than the stick. You may say, hey, we're going to pay them for showing up for work on time. Well, yes, if you want to keep them doing it. It doesn't have to be monetary compensation. You want to be creative with what are all the different rewards you can use. And from the workforce perspective, maybe it's they get their first pick of vacation weeks, or if there's 15 minutes where we're just overstaffed, an extra 15 minutes, time off the phone, enjoy yourself. So you have to be creative with what you use as rewards, but those rewards will get you better adherence than the sticks will. Okay, back over to you, Chris. Sorry about that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So, I mean, it's all about employee engagement, and you hear those people, there's a good proportion of the audience there using WFM software, and for those of us that use the software, there's quite a lot of things we can do regarding employee engagement. It's a bit more difficult to be using Excel or something like that for scheduling. In that case, engagement is pretty much limited to printing or emailing agent schedules to them, and that's it. But if you have got a system in place, there's a couple of key things that can really help drive adherence, and probably preaching to be converted for those who've already got it. But when an agent's got a personal portal, he's really engaged in the process. And what's more, the planners and the supervisors can address the don't know, the can'ts, and the won't behaviour. I mean, basically what the portal lets agents do is view their shifts at any time. And with our system, they can even do that on their smartphone or tablet. And we'll have a look at that in a minute. Now, the system allows us to integrate the schedule with the smartphone calendar, so the agent gets calendar reminders in just the same way as they get reminders of their dates, hot dates, and birthdays and things like that. And what's more, there's an incentive to use the portal. Agents love being able to do all these self-service things like shift swaps, holiday requests, and even bidding for shifts if that's something that you want to do on a self-service basis. So really, having this portal which really puts the agent sort of in the driving seat can really help with the adherence measures.
Well, let's go and have across now and have a quick look at that portal, and then we'll come back to some top tips. So, Dean, if you've got a demonstration there lined up, I certainly were quite impressed with this in rehearsal.
Yep. So, afternoon, everybody. This is our new, what we call injixo Me, is a new agent portal we just launched. So it's completely browser friendly. So obviously it opens up different handsets, portable devices, home PCs or Apple Macs, whatever anybody's using. So like Chris was saying, it gives the employee, initially, like this first page is a quick overview of their schedules, what's today or later on today, what's the next 7 days, what holidays do they want to request, what's pending for a decision, things like that straight away. But the bigger and more focal point is obviously getting it mobile and portable, so wherever somebody is, they know where they should be. So just an example here, I'm just going to share my iPhone on the screen, and all I've got here is simply a normal launcher. So I've just saved the web page as a desktop launching icon, and it just launches into the web page as normal. And the view, as you can see, is exactly the same as what we had on that other main screen earlier. So we've got here like the 7-day summary of their schedule. They want to swap a shift, like you can see against the index at the top. You can see the crossed arrow icon. They can select on those and offer their shift out for swap. If there's existing offers that other people are trying to swap, they can see those as well. So it gives all the functionality similar to the desktop as well, hopefully visible right now. And it just makes it incredibly simple and accessible to people. And having that and taking it, away with them to, on their calendars or download the schedule to a calendar to get those reminders is fantastic. People cannot be excused for not knowing where they should be. Being out of the office for lunch, they get an alert 10 minutes beforehand saying you should be back at your desk in 10 minutes.
Dean, thank you very much for that. I think we were getting a bit of feedback problems coming there. I don't know if when you put the phone in it started to come back through, so we'll jump back to that a bit later on. So, okay, well, let's have a look at some of the tips for goal setting and agent diagnosis. So let's have a look at here what we've got coming in from the audience. So top tips for goal setting, diagnosis, and agent engagement. So let's look at the first couple of tips coming through. Nicholas said the advisor can use a break timer to help keep agents on track. What else have we got? We've got getting the buy-in of managers on the floor so that they understand the importance helps with adherence. And you definitely need buy-in from management. To help do this, the resource team conducted a financial cost of non-adherence presentation to the management team. We then amended the presentation and rolled it out to all of the call center advisors. But for an absence, this makes your friends work harder point of view. That's quite an interesting technique, Penny, there, that that if you're not working there, it's making your friends work harder.
I think that's a huge piece of the education is showing the occupancy and helping them understand that. That's when we do all those power of one games of, just 1 or 2 people drop out and, hey, look how much harder it is for everyone else. That sometimes means more to the staff and kind of grabs hold more than what is the impact on the customer. So you definitely want to use that kind of education.
Wonderful. So let's have a look at a couple more of the tips coming through. So we've got advisors need to understand the impact of their non-adherence attendance on colleagues, so very similar to the previous one, and the ability to meet customer demand. Use adherence figures against overall call center performance for non-adherence times, and concern to manage their own behaviors. Dean, that looks quite a useful technique to use.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one, Jonty, because my first contact centre was an outsourcer who, had you could be late within the average call time of a typical call. Any more than that, you would have a knock-on effect to not only your colleagues but also your business as well, with penalty fines for the possibly loss of service for the day, week, month, whatever it may be. Works very well.
And Chris, we've got user tagging system so that agents can only go when their buddy comes back, which ensuring that too many people aren't off the floor and people keep to times. What's your view on that, Chris?
I mean, this is something we discussed earlier, isn't it? This is the tennis ball or the ping pong ball idea. So I think it'd be traced back to the Toyota production system, actually, where there's only a certain amount of brakes allowed to be in circulation at any one time, and it definitely works. The only observation I'd make, it's about controlling the number of people on break at any one time. But in fact, we might have very carefully planned the breaks, if we're scheduling and planning breaks, to coincide with troughs in call volume. So there are upsides and downsides to that approach, I think.
Okay, well, I think we're going to now jump to a little section, the last of our strategies. We're running a little short on time. So, Chris, if you'd like to take us through the 7th strategy, which I believe is to dealing with supporting tools.
Absolutely, Jonty. Yes. So this will be a short one. I think we'll be fine on time. I mean, I think we've hinted already at the value of workforce management tools in this context, and the ability to get accurate reports on adherence and conformance is obviously the key. As Penny was saying earlier, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we've already seen an example of an adherence report, what we call a historic adherence and conformance report, which is great for appraisals and one-to-ones. And it does make the consequences of poor adherence more certain, going back to Penny's point. Now, even better is if you've got live real-time adherence monitoring. It lets supervisors take corrective action before it becomes a problem. And that makes consequences immediate, going back to Penny's point. So let's quickly move over to Dean, who will show us the thing in action in injixo WFM.
So, Dean, let's put the baton across to you. And
you, Chris. So hopefully everybody can see the screen now. I'll just have to change into the main application. But this adherence monitor screen, it's a very simple process of you've got your schedules in place and you've got your phone system knowing what people are doing on the actual handsets and what calls or statuses they're sitting in. It's just recording that information and comparing it in real time to what is being planned against them. So as you can see, within injixo, what we have here is the highlighting structure where you can build in some of those tolerances that Penny mentioned earlier. So you only see those people that, if they've gone on break by 30 seconds late, you don't want it to highlight so you don't start getting the stick out too early. But so it only brings up the real emergency cases so you can see them before obviously the main issues start going. Now, what you can do here is obviously filter them to, like a greatest out of exception. So obviously I've got some artificial data running here, so obviously the calls all look really long for the duration of the current one. But a lot of cases, so if we took Mark Smith, the last but one highlight there, yes, he is out of adherence. He should have, in theory, logged off by now, and that should have been 22 minutes ago. But he's been stuck on a call for 25 minutes. So it gives that more judgment and continuity feel of, yes, he is out of adherence for 3 minutes, say, but he could be on the call for 5 or 10. So you know exactly what's the cause of it and how long he's been stuck on that individual activity. Not that he's just trying to take another call, going to not ready, take another call to avoid his lunch break, whatever it may be. But the joy of this is all those last 2 columns is constantly being recorded, so you can, like Chris said, use them for adherence monitoring and performance monitoring, marry them up against the schedules at any historical period for team or individual basis reports. You've always got an eye on the floor, and given access to this to like team leaders and floor walkers as well, you then got active, visible people on the floor who are, keeping, sort of issuing the sticker to people as such, but without, and that visual awareness, again, drives the adherence even higher because they know they're going to be seen by somebody.
I know something a lot of our customers like with this, Dean, is that you can highlight the known offenders with the spotlight button on the left, and then make sure you've always got your BDI on them, even if they're in adherence.
Yeah. So if you have a notorious trio that are always taking lunches and breaks late, for example, or together, you could shoot them to the top and sort by that order instead, with the tick boxes for the commonalities first, basically, and you can filter by teams or what we call selections, where it could just be somebody with a tag against them, so you might group people with certain tags, so you can always monitor them at the same time.
Thank you very much for that, Dean. Chris, I think you've got some comments you were looking to make about the affordability of this type of solution.
Yes, I can't resist pointing this out to Jonty. It's obviously workforce management. We've shown a couple of things around that. It has got a bit of a reputation for being a bit more expensive than we'd like to pay. Quite often a big capital expense. It's got a reputation for requiring big upfront license fees, annual maintenance fees, setup fees, training, that kind of thing. But the good news is, injixo WFM from Envision is just £9 per user per month. You have it on a pay-as-you-go basis, and that £9 is inclusive of all the things listed on the screen here. The only other thing to budget for is the initial setup and training, which is normally quite cheap, and we do that in a very efficient, streamlined way. Now, this means that you can get access to all this functionality for a very low price. It also means that it's normally what the finance people call OPEX, operational expense, rather than capital expense, which means that the business case is that much easier to prove. And typically, the return on investment period for a cloud workforce management system is less than a month, which is pretty attractive to finance people. So the final point to make is that because it's a cloud service where you pay as you go, you can flex capacity up and down as you need for seasons or for campaigns, things like that. So really we've opened the door to powerful workforce management to people who previously found it perhaps a little unaffordable or difficult to justify. But don't take my word for it. We do a weekly live demo every Friday at 11 o'clock UK time. It is quite a deep dive because when we tell people the price, they think, well, there must be something missing. I'm here to tell you there isn't, but come and have a look at it if you're interested. Just drop me an email and I'll send you joining instructions. Final point, the injixo Me agent portal that Dean showed us a couple of minutes ago is now available to have a look at in YouTube. Just search for injixo Me and you'll find it. Hope that was interesting.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for that. So that's the top 7 strategies for dealing with adherence and attendance. We've got lots of tips from the audience. I'll just go through a few now. Jamie says we have a bobble hat theory in terms of targets. I've never heard of the bobble hat theory, so I'd be interested to learn more. We aim to achieve a target that we've met previously as to not be unrealistic and then increase according to as performance improves. Robert said adherence and scheduling should not be seen as an isolated area, but to be managed, but form part of the business ethos, having clear expectations regarding required behaviors with managers at all levels, and having the confidence to have real-time informed discussions where behaviors are having a negative impact, but would also praise individual teams. So, Penny, I guess that the immediacy that you can bring people on is quite important. We seem to have lost Penny there for a minute.
The snow must have arrived in Nashville.
Okay. James said we had a team incentive, so each team worked against each other for a month for a cash prize of £500. It was great for adherence for the month, but once everything finished, it went back to normal after. Interesting. Phil says manage the agent's behavior, not the agent. For example, this is how you behaved as opposed to this is what you have done. So quite interesting there. And adherence and scheduling should not be seen as, and I think we've covered that one. Our sickness levels are around 4%. So some quite interesting comments there. We've got loads more comments coming through. We're just typing them in. So we'll publish everything on next week's edition of Call Center Help.